Hi, today I'll be coding a Glassmorphism effect inspired by the one seen right here. And in case you're wondering what the hell is Glassmorphism, I am going to link to an article that explains it in a lot of detail, a lot better than I could do it. But the basic idea is the following. So we have this navigation, and when we hover or focus one of the items, we get a colored copy of the icon popping out from behind the top version, which is a grayish glossy one, and you can see how the bottom version is seen a bit blurred throughout the top layer, the glossy gray one. So yeah, that's the effect we're after. Now we already have this object right here where we have the items with the icons and the hues. And in case anyone is wondering why I'm using emojis, it's something that I find a lot easier than spending a lot of time on SVGing things, and I've done this in previous demos. Yeah, you can check them out, play with them. There's actually a video for this one. But let's get back here, and we are first going to get an array out of this object. So let's get our array, but I should type that correctly. Object entries, and in case you need a reference for this, I'm going to link it in the description, so don't worry about that part. Then we are going to get the length of our array, and we are going to put everything in a nav, and that includes a loop. So for let I going from 0 all the way up to n, and if I could type, that would be amazing. Okay, and put the links. Okay, now let's maximize this so we can see everything better, and we are going to put the text inside the link. So this array, at every index, it has one of these entries, and it's an array. At 0 we have the key, at 1 we have the value. So I, and at 0 we have the key, because that's what we want there. And okay, now the next step, we could set the icon in an attribute and then use pseudo elements to put it on the screen. But that's not ideal, and it's not ideal from an accessibility point of view, and it's not ideal from a practical point of view, because it's not that simple as just using pseudo elements on these links. So we are going to use some spans. And by the way, let's also add here a class, right? So just prevent those emojis from being read out, because we already have the text, the link text, so there's no point in the screen reader reading the emojis as well. And here we're going to put the icons. Let's actually first get them here. So at index I, and the value is going to be index 1 there, and icon. Okay. Then we're going to have something very similar here, right? And this is going to be the mono layer, and this is going to be the top gray glossy layer. Okay. And finally, we are going to want to pass that hue to the CSS as a custom property in the style attribute of each link. So we have the custom property, and we're going to need to interpolate that. So at index I, it's the value, so index 1, hue, and this is an angle, so degrees. Okay, now we can move on to the CSS and start prettifying things. We're going to need to come back to this, but for now, let's just do that one thing you may have seen me do in previous videos. So just set display grid on everything, and next we are going to set an explicit width on the navigation items, and I'm going to show you just why we need an explicit width there. So let's actually first comment it out so you can see what's the problem without that. So box shadow, something like that, and on the navigation we are going to set grid autoflow column, right? And now you are going to see how the width of each item depends on the text length, and it becomes even more obvious if we set place self center. The default is stretch, right? You can see. But now if we have fixed width, That's a lot better. And a few more prettifying styles, right? Those like that. And on the icon spans, we're also going to want them to be stacked one on top of the other. So we're going to have grid area. They're all going to be at the intersection between the first row and first column, right? We're going to bump up their font size. Something like that. And one more thing, place self center. Okay, now having done this, let's prettify the font as well. So we are going to use a clamp value, so we can set a minimum and a maximum. I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference between them. So probably could have done without a clamp and with just a fixed value, but oh well. So looks kind of like that. Nice. And let's also set a padding here. Now, if you've paid attention to the result, you may have seen how the navigation moved down. But otherwise, it's not that obvious that we've added that padding. So let's set a few more prettifying styles on the body. So first up, a background that is not going to be black, but still pretty dark. Okay, and then we are also going to set its height explicitly, because at this point, the height is given by the height of its content, which is this navigation. So, which is why the navigation doesn't appear to be in the middle vertically as well, even though we set place self-center, and this is a shortcut, a shorthand for both align self-center and justify self-center. Okay, so it should be in the middle vertically, and technically it is because the body takes the height of the nav. But let's explicitly set the body to the height of the viewport. And this gives us a scroll bar because we have a margin around the body. But if we zero that, we get rid of the scroll bar, or we could just go full nuclear, overflow hidden, whatever. Now, the next step, set a background here and make it white. And now you can see that. Let's get rid of the box shadow, we won't be needing it anymore. And let's use the class because, yeah, we've, that's why we added it. And here we're going to have a transform. So we're going to move those icons a bit to the left. So translate, not to the left, to the right, right? Or right is the east, right? As you'd look on a map. And that's the positive direction. So it's with plus. And up, I'm not mistaking up and down. Up is in the negative direction of the y-axis. So it's going to be with minus. Okay, so yeah, there you go. I don't know which way is left and which way is right. Seriously, I don't know it. And that's why I find it so confusing that so many properties in CSS use those, because which way is left and which way is right? I mean, why didn't they use like north and south and east and west? Because that's, you can visualize the map, but how can you visualize left and right? That's just something I never got. Okay, rotate. And we're going to rotate by, let's say, half of 45 degrees. Okay, so like that. And now, because of the translation, because of the transform, we get this mono on top of the gray, even though the DOM order would suggest otherwise. So that's why on the gray, we are going to set Z index. So that fixes things. Okay, but we want that mono and we want that gray. So let's fix that part. We are going to make it mono with a sepia filter. And this is going to make everything yellow brownish, something like that. And of course that's not enough because we want them in different colors depending on that hue. But let's also set the color here, right? So it's going to be an HSL value depending on that hue that we've passed to the CSS as a custom property. Here we're going to max out the saturation, midway luminosity, right? And we are going to want the same kind of hues for the icons. And let's say that this yellowish brown has a hue of around 50 degrees, right? So then we are going to have hue rotate. It's a real shame we don't have autocomplete for the filter function names, because they've been around for quite a while. So here we're going to use that hue that we've passed as a custom property to the CSS minus those 50 degrees of the default sepia. And you can see how we get the right hue, but they're kind of washed out. So we're going to bump up the saturation. So saturate, again, we don't have autocomplete for that. And that does it. You can see how they're more lively now. And here, we're going to use filter. Okay, and let's also use opacity 0.35, something like that. Now, what I thought would be the last step at this point is to add here backdrop filter blur, and let's actually set this value up here. So, like that. And as you can see, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because of that filter. The thing with this Glassmorphism effect, all the examples that I've ever seen and that I've played with so far were using one element in the back, another element on top of it, with a semi-transparent background. So the background is semi-transparent. We are not achieving semi-transparency with an opacity filter or with the opacity property. Those don't work. The background, the semi-transparent background, works. Opacity, semi-transparency with opacity, doesn't work. But what can we do? Because in this case, we want the emoji to be transparent, not the background to be semi-transparent. The thing is, something that I didn't know, let's just comment that one out. I didn't know about this one thing. So if we set the color to a semi-transparent value, right? All the other components, hue, saturation, lightness, these get ignored. But the last one, the alpha, gets applied on the icon, which is really funny. And now you can see, yeah, that's totally weird. Let's refresh a bit. And you can see how now we have the blur, which we should have had before, but for some reason we needed a refresh to see it. And you can see how everything gets blurred inside the box and not inside the actual shape. Okay, so a solution that we can use right here would be set a mask. Right, and it's going to be a gradient that covers everything. So this has an alpha of 1 everywhere, but it's clipped to the text. And you can see how now we have that nice blur, and we can reduce this even further to something like that, and you can see it better. You have that nice blurriness there, but it doesn't work here. So the clip is a non-standard value for a mask clip. So it only works in WebKit. It's not going to work in Firefox. So we're going to need a separate Firefox solution. But for now, let's do the solution here. The thing is, filter grayscale is also going to mess up things. And we don't want that. So we are going to have another element and another gray one. And this one is going to turn into a middle one. Right, so the proper gray is going to be on top of everything, and this is going to be a mid layer. So let's change that. And from here, we are going to take those two properties, cut and paste right here. All right. Yeah, I can't type. What else is new? So now we have that nice blurriness right there. Let's make that. Okay, so we have that nice blurriness right there and the effect that we wanted in Chromium browsers. Now let's move on to Firefox. With Firefox, we can do something else that's pretty cool, and that is use an element as the background for another element, using this element function, which is only supported in Firefox. How convenient. Okay, so that means that we're going to need to add one more element, which is going to be a blurred version of that mono one. So it's going to get an ID right here, blur, and it's going to depend on the loop index. And here, for this middle layer, in a style attribute, we are going to set background image. Okay, background image. And yes, it needs the prefix, which I cannot even spell right. Element. Hopefully I spelled at least that one right. Blur. And here we're going to need to interpolate that index. So that should do it. And here we are going to have, if the ID includes blur, right, then we're going to set position fixed and bottom 0 for now, just so that we can see that element at the bottom. And we are going to add a bit of blurring. Actually, this also has the mono class, right? And we're going to add a bit of blurring at the end of this chain for that blur element, right? So we're going to have blur using a blur radius that is initially 0, but here we're going to change it to that blur. Let's see it. So now you can see the background right there. Now here we're going to use supports, background. So this is only going to check in Firefox. And we are also going to set background color. We're going to set it to white because we don't want to see through the middle layer to the mono layer in the back, the one that hasn't been blurred. So we're going to set this white. We're also going to set background clip to text. This does work in Firefox and is now standard. And let's avoid letting that backdrop filter mess up things. So like that. Now you can see how we get the blurriness right there as well. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good in both browsers. Now one more thing we are going to want, and that is handle hover and focus. So here we are going to have a highlight flag. Hover and focus are going to be our highlight states, and initially this highlight flag is 0, but in the hover or focus case, we are going to switch the value of this to 1. And this is something that I detailed in an article. So basically you just switch the value of one custom property from 0 to 1, and a lot of other properties depend on this, and they all change when that one property changes. So that really helps with keeping the code dry and avoiding repetitions, writing less code, avoiding issues when we modify in one place but forget to modify in another place. And also here we're going to make those translation values depend on the highlight filter, so we're going to multiply with it, and we're going to do the same for this rotation, but that's a different number of characters. that's the whole deal with that. So we're going to have highlight, right, and also opacity, and let's also set here an animation duration, something like that. And here we're going to have transition, color, and use that animation duration. And right here we are going to have another transition for transform, right, same duration, and also opacity, same duration, but we can tweak and have different timing functions for each if you're more artistic than me in that department, right? Now initially there's one thing that's doesn't seem to be working properly, because we still see the colored version right there, and I just don't get why we're seeing it colored. So this should have opacity 0 at this point, so I'm not understanding why it does look like we have a bit of color there in the back. Let's just move that out of sight. So for some reason it does look like we have a bit of color there, and I'm not understanding why. It doesn't look like it's fully gray, but it should be. So grayscale 1, right? So what if we didn't have, let's see. Oh, I got it. That's not fully transparent. So we need to make that fully transparent. That's the problem. Oh, I wasn't with the cursor in the right place. And now that's the result we wanted. Look at it, so nice. Okay, I'm not going to play with it anymore. I'm going to stop here. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like the work that I'm putting out since early 2012 and you want me to be able to do more in the future, please consider supporting it. You can do so by being a cool cat and becoming a patron on Patreon, or if monthly support is not your style, there's the option of one-time donation. Or you can make the stray cat happy with a gift of her wish list, or you could at least share this to show the world what can be done with CSS these days, because honestly, I think it's really damn cool. In any event, thanks for watching, happy, scary Halloween, and I'll see you next time. Bye!